So the reason why I said I got my timelines mixed up is we have to go back to when Israel was in Egypt and they were being taken out of Egypt. So Jesus as the Passover lamb. So that's where I was going with that, sorry. So I had said that God told Abraham, your descendants are going to be in this country for 400 years. And then on that 400 years, when they're released, they kill the Passover lamb who protects them from death. But they don't just kill the lamb, they say bring all of their friends into the house and make sure that none of the lamb gets uneaten. Make sure that you have enough for all of the people that are going to eat it, and then everybody stay in that house with the blood covering it. And so God said, as he told Abraham about Isaac, they had a meal together. Then 400 years later, God's coming, there's a sacrifice and there's a meal of the covenant. Like, here it is. This is the time I'm renewing my covenant with you. That's what the whole eating of the meal and sacrificing the lamb was. It was the renewing of the covenant, and that's what that picture was. Okay. Whoa, God, thank you. It's like, okay, so full circle to that. So Jesus is a picture of all of those things. He's Isaac in the sacrifice from Abraham and Isaac. You look like you're cold. I'll turn this up.
No.
Oh, okay. So Jesus is that picture of Abraham sacrificing Isaac. But Abraham is not angry or punishing Isaac in that picture. It's a test to see if Abraham is in covenant with God. And then God's like, no, stop. Okay, don't kill him, because he really didn't want him to be killed. But as far as Abraham was concerned, he was as good as dead because God had asked him. So in those three pictures, the Passover lamb, Isaac, and the atoning sacrifice of the law, there's no wrath. There's just a covering of sin. And so that is who Jesus was. That's what he did.
What was the three? The Passover lamb,
The Passover lamb, Isaac, and the atoning sacrifice of the law. And I guess one more is the sacrifice becomes a meal, which the meal is the ratification and the joining of the covenant.
Okay, let me write that down.
Okay.
Okay, so the sacrifice becomes the meal.
Mm-hmm. And the meal is the sealing. It's kind of it's the two parties coming together in agreement.
The meal is the sealing of the agreement.
Right.
And none of them have wrath in it.
And none of them have wrath in it. All of them have an idea of continuation of covenant, or establishing a covenant, or not Isaac, because Abraham didn't eat Isaac, but when the lambs were sacrificed, that became the meal which the two parties enjoyed. And we see that in like Exodus, where God ate and drank with the elders, which is a really cool picture. So that is what the cross was all about. But because it was a picture of what was to come, like God was promising the Israelites and his people that he was going to make a new covenant with them. And all of those pictures kind of bleed into the new covenant that Jesus made on the Last Supper, the last Passover. And he said, take this bread and drink, or take this bread and eat. This is my body given to you. So he, as the sacrificial lamb, is saying like, okay, this bread is symbolic of my body. We're not gonna, and then take this wine and drink it. We're sharing a meal together. We're starting a new covenant together. This is the bread and wine of my new covenant that I'm making with you, and it's going to be eternal. So I've I've done a very crude drawing.
Can we make copies?
Yes. Maybe we can do a better one. Let me show you. This bottom one is so this top one is the promise was first given to Eve that her seed would crush Satan. The next time a promise of a seed coming to restore the earth is to Abraham and then to David, and it gets fulfilled in Jesus, and then that promise comes to all of mankind.
Okay, I want to make copies of this because I want to make notes on it as you're speaking.
All right.
Can you just wait a second? Or do you have to go through it? Because I want to write that down, what you just said.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to...
Okay, go ahead. Oh, you're on pausing. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to pause it. So I'll explain it and then pause it, and then you can go photocopy it. So the promise to Eve, the promise to Abraham, and the promise to David came true in Jesus, is a continuing, lasting covenant that lasts forever. It didn't end. But the promise that came to Moses from Abraham, because Moses was a descendant of Abraham, had an end. Like there was no continuation of the old covenant. That had an end to it. And Jesus, here, I'll pause it at this point. Testing, is this working? Okay, I'm just gonna talk and we can ask questions or not. So the promises to Abraham, the promises to David are fulfilled in Jesus. And then the promise of Jesus goes to all mankind. You can see it in the top line. Okay. And then the really bad drawing on the bottom one is
like it.
Moses had a promise of, Moses had a covenant that continued on for a time. And within that covenant, there was a promise of a new covenant. And Jeremiah notably is one of the prophets that talks about God's going to make a new covenant with the house of Israel. He's going to write his laws on your heart. He's going to take out your heart of stone. He's going to give you a new mind. But Moses wrote a song it's recorded in Deuteronomy 31. It's called the Song of Moses, appropriately enough. And it talks about, it's a song, 32.
Say that again.
Moses wrote this song called the Song of Moses in Deuteronomy 32. And it talks about God is your God, his ways are perfect, he's really awesome and great, and he took you into this land, but you're going to get in this land and you're going to get fat and you're going to drink your wine and you're going to drink your milk and you're going to forget the God who gave you. And when you do that, he's going to bring war and terror on you, and you're going to waste away in terror, and there's going to be bloodshed, and there's going to be all kinds of things that are bad and will happen to you, and your land is going to burn and become an utter waste. And he said, and so I'm teaching you this song, and you're going to remember it throughout all generations, so that when it happens, you'll think like, oh my God, this is what happened.
That's right. We believe you.
Oh, gee, that's what happened. So, as I said a couple weeks ago, there are things that happen prophetically in the Old Testament, like Moses saying you're going to be taken away. That was fulfilled in the Old Testament, like Babylon came and took them away. But then Jesus said in Luke 24 that he came to fulfill everything written about him in the law of Moses and the prophets and the scriptures. So there's a fulfillment that happened in the Old Testament, like in reality, and then there's a spiritual fulfillment that happens in Jesus as well. And
That's interesting.
so when 70 AD happened, Rome came. They surrounded Jerusalem. They starved everybody out in the city of Jerusalem. They ended up burning it to the ground and completely and utterly destroying the temple and the entire city of Jerusalem. And pretty much said, Moses said it just very briefly, but fulfilled all those things that the Old Testament prophets had said, that this is going to come and this is going to happen to you. So in burning the temple held all the records of the priests in the line of Levi. Only a person who is from the line of Levi can serve as a priest at the temple. So when they burned the temple, they burned all of the genealogical records. So that means that today and since then, there's been no priest, no presence of God. There's been no altar to sacrifice anything on. There's been no laver, which was, all of these things are parts of the law. Like God said, this is what you have to do to sacrifice to me. This is what you have to do to worship me. There's been no giant laver, which was a bath that the priest had to bathe in before that they could even go and serve at the altar. There's been no temple. There's been no Ark of the Covenant, and there's been no candlestick burning in the altar. So that old covenant is impossible to live up to. Nobody can, because none of those articles exist. So even if they were to build a temple in Jerusalem, there's no guarantee that they could find a priest, a Levitical line. They don't have the instruments made, and they don't know where the Ark of the Covenant is, and there's been a rumor for 800 years that it's in Ethiopia, but Ethiopia is a pretty miserable little country. I mean, people could go and invade and take it if they wanted. You know what I mean? It's they don't have a giant army defending it, and this thing would be the most priceless object on the earth, and they say that it's in this little cobblestone church out in the middle of Ethiopia. I don't know if it is or not or whatever. But the point is that Moses, the covenant that God made with Moses, came to an end, a complete and total end, and there's no way to resurrect it. There was no way for them to, and there was no promise.
So you're saying 70 AD, when that happened, that's when it legitimately came to an end, because they
Right.
no longer had, okay, got it.